This story is titled, Girlfriend Faked a Cheating Text to Turn My Family Against Me and They Cut Me Off. Years later, they begged me to forgive them, but I hit them with the truth they didn't want to hear. Hi everyone, before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and make sure you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. Hey Reddit, to give you some background before I take you into my family chaos. I grew up in San Francisco. My family wasn't just wealthy. We were the kind of wealthy that made people treat you differently. My parents, Vijay and Annika, owned a successful chain of luxury, eco-friendly resorts that catered to high-end clients who wanted to save the planet in style. They were the kind of people who thought networking was a competitive sport. Every dinner, every charity gala, and every casual backyard barbecue somehow turned into a strategic meeting. Their pride and joy, besides their resorts, was the relationship they had with another powerhouse family who ran an event planning company. These families were like a perfect business partnership, feeding off each other's strengths. They planned the events. We hosted them. The parents acted like their bond was written in the stars. So when I started dating their daughter Maya, my parents couldn't have been happier. In fact, happy doesn't even cover it. They were practically doing victory laps. I was 24 at the time, just starting to work in the family business, and Maya was 23, already deep into managing parts of her parents' company. We met at one of those typical over-the-top networking parties our families were known for, where everyone wore designer clothes and smiled a little too much. At first, Maya and I hit it off because of how much we had in common. We both grew up with a sense of obligation, always aware that the family name came with expectations. We could joke about the absurdity of our lives, like how our parents would schedule family dinners 2 months in advance, or how we both had to learn the proper way to give a toast by age 10. It felt like we got each other, and that was rare for me. By the time we officially started dating, our parents acted like it was the best thing that had ever happened. Finally, the next generation is taking charge, my dad would say, as if our relationship was some business milestone. Every family event became a photo op for Arjun and Maya, the future. At first, I didn't mind it. I was young, and the attention felt good in a way. But it wasn't long before the cracks started showing, not in public, of course, but behind closed doors. Maya loved being in the spotlight. She was charming, polished, and could command a room like it was her stage. She loved being known as half of the golden couple. For her, our relationship wasn't just about us. It was about the image, the brand, and how we looked to the world. If I ever wanted a quiet night in, she'd guilt trip me saying, "We're supposed to be building something bigger here. People are watching us." My parents didn't help. They adored her. My mom called her the perfect daughter-in-law, which always made things awkward considering she wasn't even my fiancé. My dad, who was usually tough to impress, would go out of his way to praise her. It wasn't just her charm, it was what she represented. To them, Maya was a bridge between our family and hers, cementing a partnership that could last generations. And that was the problem. Everyone saw our relationship as more than a relationship. It was a business strategy. My parents used to drop subtle comments about our future. "You two are unstoppable," my mom said one night after a dinner party, as if she was congratulating us on a merger. "You'll take both families to new heights." I wanted to scream, "What if I don't want this? What if Maya isn't the person for me?" But I didn't. I kept my mouth shut because I knew how much this meant to them. Things only got worse as time went on. Maya and I started arguing more. She had this way of making me feel guilty for even thinking about pulling back. If I didn't want to go to some event with her, she'd say things like, "Do you even care about what we're building?" It wasn't about us anymore. It was about this image she had in her head of what we were supposed to be. One time, I suggested taking a step back from all the public appearances and focusing on us. Her response? "We can't just disappear, Arjun. People expect to see us together. Do you know how bad it would look if we started pulling back now?" The worst part was how my parents acted like Maya could do no wrong. Anytime I voiced even the smallest concern, they'd brush it off. "You two are so good together," my mom would say, completely ignoring the tension. My dad once told me, "You're lucky to have someone like Maya. Don't take it for granted." At first, I thought maybe I was the problem. Maybe I wasn't trying hard enough or wasn't appreciating her enough. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. The truth was, we weren't a match. We might have looked great on paper, but we weren't actually good for each other. I started feeling like I was playing a role in someone else's movie. Every time we went to a party or a dinner, I'd put on my best smile and pretend like everything was fine. But inside, I felt trapped. I'd look around at all these people congratulating us on being perfect, and wonder how many of them actually knew anything about our relationship. There was this one night that really hit me. My parents had thrown a massive dinner to celebrate some milestone at the resorts, and Maya and I were, of course, front and center. My dad made a toast about how proud he was of us, and how our relationship was the future of the family. Everyone clapped and smiled while I just stood there, holding my drink and feeling like a prop. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how I got here. I wasn't angry at Maya or even my parents. I was angry at myself for letting it get this far. I wanted to break free, but I didn't know how. It felt like leaving Maya wasn't just ending a relationship, it was letting down my family, her family, and everyone who had been rooting for us. Looking back, I realized I should have spoken up sooner, but at the time it felt impossible. I kept telling myself that maybe things would get better, that maybe I just needed to try harder. But deep down, I knew the truth. Maya and I weren't building a life together. We were just building a facade, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep it up. I think the turning point for me was when I realized that being with Maya wasn't just draining, it was exhausting in a way that felt impossible to recover from. The relationship had stopped being about two people figuring life out together and turned into a constant performance. And the scary part? I didn't even know when that shift had happened. It wasn't always bad, to be fair. Maya and I had moments where things felt normal, even fun, like when we'd sneak away from family events to grab burgers at this hole-in-the-wall diner downtown. It was one of the few times we could just talk without any eyes on us, and for a while, it made me think maybe we still had something worth holding on to. But those moments were rare. Most of the time, I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, trying to balance what Maya wanted with what my parents expected. Maya wasn't an evil person until here, or anything, but she had this knack for turning every situation into something that benefited her. If I brought up feeling overwhelmed, she'd spin it around saying, "We're in this together, remember? If you're struggling, we'll figure it out, as long as we stay strong for each other." At first, that sounded supportive, but over time, I realized it was her way of keeping me in line. Staying strong for each other really meant, don't rock the boat because it'll make me look bad. I started noticing how calculated everything was with her. Every social media post, every dinner party, every time we attended some event together, it was all about appearances. She'd spend hours getting ready, not because she wanted to impress me, but because she wanted to impress the crowd. And if I wasn't matching her energy, it became a problem. One time, we were at a charity gala, and I wasn't feeling great, just tired from a long week at work. I thought I could get through the night quietly, but Maya wasn't having it. "Arjun, people are noticing you're not engaging," she whispered sharply while we stood near the buffet table. I was stunned. I wasn't being rude. I just wasn't bouncing around the room like I was running for mayor. She ended up steering the conversation for the rest of the night, telling everyone how excited I was about our future plans. Plans I didn't even know we had, by the way. I felt like I was watching my own life happen from the outside, with Maya narrating the script. Things got worse when my parents started weighing in. My mom would make little comments like, "Maya mentioned you seemed stressed lately. You should talk to her. She's so understanding." Or my dad would casually bring up how important it was to keep your partner happy, as if I wasn't already bending over backward to meet everyone's expectations. It felt like Maya and my parents were on the same team, and I was just along for the ride. My sister Priya wasn't much help either. She was firmly in Maya's corner, constantly saying how great we were together, and how she wished she had a relationship as solid as ours. Anytime I hinted at being unhappy, she'd wave it off like I was being dramatic. The thing is, I don't think Maya was trying to be manipulative on purpose. She genuinely believed in the idea of us as a power couple. In her mind, we were two ambitious people building something amazing together. But that wasn't the reality. I wasn't building anything. I was just following her lead, nodding along to whatever narrative she created. I remember one night when we were out with her friends, another one of those double dates where everyone tries to one-up each other with stories about work or vacations. Maya was in her element, laughing and telling some story about how we were planning a trip to Europe. I hadn't even heard about this supposed trip. When her friend asked me about it, I had to scramble to come up with a vague answer. Later, when I brought it up to Maya, she brushed it off. "I was just thinking out loud," she said. "But wouldn't it be great if we did that?" Everyone loved the idea. They think we're so adventurous. It wasn't about actually taking a trip. It was about the image of us as this jet-setting couple. As the months went on, I started feeling more disconnected. Maya didn't notice, or maybe she did, but she didn't care as long as the performance continued. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Every day was about putting on a show, whether it was for our families, her friends, or the business community. I started avoiding her when I could. Not in an obvious way, but in little ways. Working late, canceling plans last minute, or pretending to be too tired for long conversations. At first, I thought maybe I just needed some space to figure things out. But the more space I got, the more I realized how much better I felt without her constant presence. Even when we were together, it felt like we weren't really connecting. She'd talk about some new business opportunity or a fancy event she wanted us to attend, and I'd nod along, barely paying attention. When I tried to bring up things that actually mattered to me, like how I was considering stepping away from the family business, she'd either dismiss it or steer the conversation back to something she cared about. One night, I told her I was thinking about taking some time to travel on my own, just to clear my head. She looked at me like I'd just told her I wanted to move to Mars. Why would you do that? She asked, genuinely confused. We're building a future together. You can't just take off and leave everything behind? That's when it hit me. Maya didn't see me as a person with my own dreams and struggles. To her, I was just a piece of the puzzle, someone who fit into the life she wanted to create. And the scariest part was, I'd let her do it. I don't know exactly when the resentment started, but once it was there, I couldn't ignore it. Every time she talked about our future, I felt like screaming. It wasn't our future, it was hers, and I was just a supporting actor. So at that point, if I'd thought things with Maya were strained before, nothing could have prepared me for what came next. I wasn't happy in the relationship, but I kept telling myself it wasn't the right time to break things off. Between family pressure, business connections, and Maya's knack for making me feel guilty about everything, it was easier to put my feelings on the back burner. That changed when Maya dropped a bomb I didn't see coming. It started on a random Tuesday evening. I'd just gotten home from work, tired and annoyed from dealing with a long day of meetings. I was planning to order takeout and zone out in front of the TV when I got a text from Priya, my sister. The message just said, "Call me, now." Priya and I didn't talk much outside of family gatherings, so her urgency threw me off. I called her, half expecting her to need a favor or to complain about something trivial. Instead, she launched into an angry tirade the moment she picked up. "How could you do this to Maya?" she snapped, her voice full of anger. Confused, I asked, "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," she shot back. "Maya showed me the messages. I can't believe you'd betray her like that." Messages? Betray her? None of it was making sense. Priya was practically yelling, accusing me of being a liar and a cheater. I tried to interrupt her to figure out what was going on, but she wouldn't let me get a word in. She told me I was disgusting, selfish, and that I'd humiliated Maya and the entire family. Finally, I managed to ask, "What messages? What are you talking about?" That's when Priya explained. Apparently, Maya had shown her screenshots of text messages between me and another woman. According to these texts, I'd been calling this woman Babe, talking about sneaking around and making plans to meet up. Maya claimed she'd found the messages on my phone and had been devastated for weeks before finally deciding to confront Priya about it. Hearing this, my stomach dropped. Not because I'd done anything wrong, I hadn't, but because I already knew no one was going to believe me. "Maya's lying," I said firmly. "I never sent those messages. I don't even know who this woman is." Priya didn't buy it. "So you're saying Maya just made it all up?" she said sarcastically. "Why would she do that, Arjun? She loves you. She's been nothing but supportive, and this is how you treat her?" The conversation ended with Priya telling me she didn't even want to look at me and that she hoped I'd figure out how to be a better person. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there, staring at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. The first thought that hit me was how ridiculous the accusation was. I'd never cheated on Maya. I hadn't even thought about cheating. The second thought was that Maya must have faked those messages. But why? The answer hit me like a ton of bricks. Maya knew I was pulling away. She'd sensed it for a while, no matter how much I tried to hide it. This was her way of flipping the script. If I was the bad guy, she'd be the victim. She wouldn't just keep me in the relationship, she'd also have my family completely on her side. Over the next few days, everything spiraled out of control. Maya had already gone to my parents with the screenshots, and by the time I tried to explain my side, they weren't interested. "We raised you better than this," my mom said during a phone call where she barely let me speak. "Maya is devastated. She's done so much for you, and this is how you repay her?" "She wouldn't make this up," my dad added. "We've seen the messages. You need to take responsibility for your actions." It was like talking to a brick wall. No matter how much I insisted that the texts were fake, no one believed me. Maya had already painted the picture of the heartbroken girlfriend, and I was cast as the cheating villain. The fallout was brutal. My parents called a family meeting, which was really just an ambush. Maya was there, sitting next to my mom and crying softly while my dad tore into me. "Do you know what you've done?" he said. "You've embarrassed the family. Do you have any idea how hard it's going to be to fix this?" Every time I tried to defend myself, Maya would wipe away a tear and say something like, "I just don't understand why you do this to me." It was like she'd rehearsed the whole thing. My parents ate it up, comforting her while glaring at me like I was the scum of the earth. What hurt the most wasn't even Maya's betrayal. It was my family's reaction. They didn't even give me the benefit of the doubt. They didn't ask questions or try to understand. They just accepted Maya's story and decided I wasn't worth defending. Within a week, I was effectively disowned. My dad told me they couldn't have someone like me tarnishing the family name and jeopardizing their relationship with Maya's family. "It's better for everyone if you stay away," he said. "You need to figure out your priorities." I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that my parents believed Maya's lies, or the fact that they were willing to cut me off so easily. Things got even worse when word spread to extended family. Suddenly, I was getting judgmental messages from cousins, aunts, and even family friends. People I barely knew were chiming in, calling me a cheater and a disgrace. One of my aunts posted something passive-aggressive on Facebook about how loyalty and honesty are the foundation of a family. It didn't mention me by name, but everyone knew what she was talking about. The only people who stuck by me were a couple of close friends, who reminded me that the truth would come out eventually. At the time, though, it didn't feel like it would. The worst part was knowing that Maya was walking around playing the victim while I was left to pick up the pieces. She'd not only ruined our relationship, she'd completely destroyed my standing with my family. And the thing is, getting disowned by your family isn't something you prepare for. It's not like there's a manual titled, "How to Rebuild Your Life," when everyone thinks you're trash. For the first few weeks, I was in a fog. It felt like I'd been hit by a train, and now I was just wandering the wreckage, trying to figure out which way was up. After the fallout with Maya and my family, I packed up my stuff and left San Francisco. I didn't really have a plan, just a vague idea that I needed to be somewhere, anywhere, else. I ended up in Austin, Texas, mostly because I'd visited once for a conference and remembered liking the vibe. It wasn't a flashy move, but at least it was far enough away from the constant reminder of what I'd lost. The first few months were rough. I stayed in a cheap apartment on the outskirts of the city, one of those places where the walls are thin, and you can hear your neighbors yelling at each other over reality TV. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had some control over my life. The first priority was getting a job. Back in San Francisco, I'd been working in the family business, managing operations for one of our resorts. It wasn't exactly a skill set that screamed start over in a new city, but I had to make it work. I scoured job boards, sent out countless applications, and went to interviews that felt like they were designed to crush my soul. Eventually, I landed a job in software sales. It wasn't glamorous or exciting, but it paid the bills. The first day on the job, I walked into a beige office filled with cubicles and fluorescent lights and thought, well, this is my life now. At first, I felt like a fish out of water. The work was repetitive, and I didn't know anyone in the office. My coworkers were polite but distant, and I spent most of my lunch breaks alone, scrolling through my phone and trying not to think about how drastically my life had changed. But slowly, things started to shift. One of my coworkers, Jake, noticed that I always brought the same sad turkey sandwich for lunch and invited me to join him and a few others at a taco truck down the street. It became a weekly tradition, and over time, I found myself loosening up around them. The job itself wasn't my passion, but it gave me something I desperately needed: structure. I threw myself into it, determined to prove to myself that I could make it on my own. I worked long hours, learned everything I could about the industry, and started to build a reputation as someone who could close deals. Outside of work, I was trying to figure out who I was, without the weight of my family's expectations. Back in San Francisco, everything I did felt like it had to serve some bigger purpose, either for the family business or for our image. But in Austin, no one cared about my last name or what I used to do. I could just be Arjun, this random guy trying to make a life for himself. I started exploring the city on weekends, checking out live music, food trucks, and hiking trails. I wasn't exactly thriving, but I was surviving, and for a while, that was enough. About a year into my new life, something unexpected happened. I'd been working late one evening, trying to finish a big presentation, when one of my coworkers mentioned that a friend of his was looking for someone to help optimize data systems for her small business. It wasn't a field I had a ton of experience in, but I figured, why not? That small gig turned into something much bigger. I realized I had a knack for consulting, helping businesses streamline their operations and improve efficiency. The work was challenging but rewarding, and it felt good to use my skills in a way that didn't involve catering to my family's expectations. Over the next 2 years, I built a consulting side hustle that eventually became my full-time job. I focused on working with small and mid-sized companies, and before I knew it, I was making more money than I ever had working for my family. In the middle of all this, I met Hannah. She was a graphic designer I'd hired for one of my clients, and from the moment we met, there was something different about her. She wasn't flashy or overly polished like Maya. She was warm, creative, and had this dry sense of humor that caught me off guard in the best way. We started out as friends, grabbing coffee after meetings and talking about everything from work to our favorite childhood cartoons. It wasn't long before those coffee dates turned into something more. Being with Hannah felt easy in a way I didn't know was possible. She didn't care about appearances or status. She cared about me, plain and simple. By the third year in Austin, I was thriving. I had a successful business, a supportive partner, and a life that felt entirely my own. One thing I learned during this time was how to let go of the bitterness. Don't get me wrong. I was still angry about what Maya did and how my family handled it. But holding on to that anger didn't serve me. The more I focused on building my new life, the less I cared about the people who'd let me down. It's funny how much can change when you're forced to start over. If you told me 4 years ago that I'd be living in Austin, running my own business, and engaged to someone like Hannah, I wouldn't have believed you. But here I was, proving to myself that I didn't need my family's approval or their money to be successful. Starting over wasn't easy, and there were plenty of nights when I felt like giving up. But the result was worth it. Then one afternoon, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I'd ignore calls like that, but something made me pick it up. Arjun? It was Priya, my sister. We hadn't spoken in years, not since she'd accused me of being the world's worst human over those fake cheating texts. Hearing her voice felt strange, like opening a door to a room you'd sealed off ages ago. Hey, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I wasn't about to roll out the red carpet after everything that had happened. She didn't waste time with small talk. I need to tell you something, she said, her voice shaky. About Maya. That was a name I hadn't heard in a while, and honestly, I'd been fine with that. But something in Priya's tone made me pause. She sounded nervous? Guilty? I couldn't quite place it. What about her? I asked. Priya hesitated before blurting out. She lied. About everything. I didn't say anything at first. I just let the words sit there, waiting for her to explain. Apparently, one of Maya's close friends, a woman named Alina, had recently reached out to Priya with some kind of confession. Alina had found out that Maya had fabricated the entire cheating scandal. She hadn't just photoshopped the texts. She'd also staged fake conversations with a burner phone to back up her story. Alina had known about it for years, but had kept quiet because she didn't want to get involved. I guess her conscience finally caught up with her. When Priya finished explaining, there was a long silence on the line. I didn't know what to say. On one hand, I wasn't surprised. I'd known the truth all along, but hearing it confirmed like this by someone who totally stood against me was somehow satisfying. Priya's voice cracked as she said, I'm so sorry, Arjun. I didn't know. I didn't want to believe you, but I should have. I should have given you the benefit of the doubt. I didn't respond right away. I don't even know what to say, I finally told her. I know I can't undo what happened, Priya said, her tone desperate. But I needed to tell you the truth. You deserve to know. I wasn't sure if I deserved anything from her at that point. It was hard to feel grateful when the truth had come years too late. The damage had already been done. Later that evening, I told Hannah about the call. She listened quietly, her face a mix of empathy and frustration. Do you think they'll actually do anything about it? She asked. I shook my head. Probably not. My family's not exactly big on admitting they were wrong. And I was right. Over the next few weeks, I didn't hear a word from my parents. Priya had clearly told them what Maya had done. She hinted as much in a follow-up text. But they didn't reach out to me. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement, nothing. It was like they didn't know how to handle the truth now that it was out. Instead of owning up to their mistakes, they chose to sweep it under the rug, pretending it had never happened. At first, I was furious. How could they not say anything after everything I'd been through? But as time went on, my anger turned into something else. Clarity. Their silence spoke volumes. It confirmed what I'd suspected all along. They cared more about appearances and their relationship with Maya's family than they did about me. The truth didn't magically fix anything. It didn't repair the years of damage or erase the betrayal I'd felt. If anything, it just highlighted how deep the cracks in my family really were. but it also gave me a strange sense of closure. I decided not to wait for an apology that was never going to come. Instead, I focused on the life I'd built in Austin. Their betrayal was awful, but it also forced me to grow in ways I never would have otherwise. It pushed me to leave the bubble I'd been living in and figure out who I really was. Would I have chosen that path if I'd had a choice? Probably not. But sometimes life doesn't give you options. It just shoves you in a direction and forces you to deal with it. I haven't spoken to Maya since everything went down, and honestly, I don't care to. She's just a chapter in my story, one I'm glad to have left behind. My family stayed where I left them, quiet and distant. No apologies, no olive branches, just a whole lot of silence. Then one day, I got an email from Priya. The subject line read, Arian's wedding invitation. Arian is my younger brother. He and I were never super close, but we got along fine growing up. He was always the quiet, agreeable one, which made him my parents' golden child after I got disowned. Reading that subject line, I wasn't sure what to expect. I opened the email, and it was weirdly casual. Priya wrote something like, Hey, hope you're doing well. I know it's been a while, but Arian is getting married in a couple of months, and we'd love for you to be there. Attached is the invite. Let me know if you can make it. That was it. Just a bland invitation, like I was some distant cousin they hadn't spoken to since a random family reunion. What struck me the most was that Arian hadn't reached out himself. It was his wedding, after all. If he really wanted me there, why couldn't he take 2 minutes to call or text me? Instead, he sent Priya as his messenger, like it was a chore he couldn't be bothered with. At first, I didn't respond. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to. But the more I thought about it, the more irritated I got. After everything that had happened, being disowned, lied about, and completely disregarded, they just expected me to show up as if nothing had happened. A week later, I got a follow-up email from Priya. This one was less casual and more emotional. She said it would mean a lot to the family if I came, that Arian wanted me there but didn't know how to ask, and that this could be a chance to move forward. That phrase, move forward, really set me off. It's like my family had adopted it as a mantra to avoid accountability. Anytime they didn't want to deal with the past, they'd throw out those words. It wasn't about healing or making amends. It was about saving face. I didn't reply to the second email either. Not long after, my dad called. Seeing his name on my phone screen was surreal. I hadn't heard from him since the day he told me to stay away because I was embarrassing the family. Against my better judgment, I picked up, curious about what he'd say. Arjun, he said, his tone brisk, but not unfriendly. Priya mentioned you haven't responded about Arian's wedding. I stayed silent for a moment, waiting to see where this was going. We'd really like you to come, he continued. It's important for the family's image to be together, and Arian wants his brother there on his big day. I couldn't help but laugh. If Arian wants me there so badly, why hasn't he called me himself? I asked. There was a pause on the other end. You know how he is, my dad said, brushing it off. He's not great with words. That's funny, I said, my tone sharper than I intended, because he seemed to have plenty of words when he cut me off with the rest of you. My dad sighed, like I was the one being difficult. That was a long time ago, Arjun. Mistakes were made, but it's time to move on. There it was again. Move on. I felt my chest tighten with frustration. You didn't just believe Maya's lies, you cut me out completely. And when the truth came out, you didn't even bother to apologize. You can't just call me now and expect everything to be fine because it's convenient for you. He was about to respond, but I said, cutting him off, You all made it clear a long time ago where I stand in this family. Arian's wedding doesn't change that. I hung up before he could respond. Over the next few weeks, the pressure ramped up. Priya sent me more emails, each one guiltier than the last. Even extended family got involved. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me on social media, telling me I was being selfish and needed to let go of the past. One of my aunts called me saying I was breaking my mother's heart by refusing to come. Things went quiet for a while. Too quiet. At first, I thought they'd finally accepted my decision, but I should have known better. This wasn't about me or my feelings. It was about the family's reputation. They weren't giving up. They were regrouping. About a week later, my mom called. I almost didn't pick up. As soon as I said hello, she launched into a teary, emotional plea. Arjun, I don't understand why you're being so cold-hearted, she said, her voice trembling. This is Arian's big day. Don't you think he deserves to have his whole family there? Her tone was so dramatic, you'd think I was single-handedly ruining the wedding. I stayed calm and told her the same thing I'd been repeating. This isn't about Arian. This is about how I was treated, and no one has even tried to make things right. She sniffled loudly, like she was trying to guilt me into feeling bad. Anyone could make such mistakes, she said. Can't we just wipe off the past? I've already moved on, I said firmly. But that doesn't mean I'm going to forget how I was treated. She tried to cut in, but I didn't let her. Now, years later, you expect me to show up for the sake of appearances? I'm not doing that. I've built a life for myself and I'm happy. I'm not going to pretend like everything's fine just because it's convenient for you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, in a softer voice, she said, "You don't understand how hard this has been for me, Arjun. I just want my family to be whole again." That line stung more than I expected. This wasn't about me. It was about her and her need to maintain the family's image. If she really wanted to make things right, she would have reached out years ago, or when the truth about Maya came out. Not now, when they needed me to play the part of the good son. "I'm sorry this has been hard for you," I said, my voice steady. "But it's been hard for me too. And unlike you, I had to go through it alone." She didn't have a response to that, and I ended the call shortly after. A few days later, I got another call, this time from Priya. I almost didn't pick up, but I figured it would be better to rip the bandage off and deal with whatever she had to say. "You're really not coming to the wedding?" she asked, skipping the pleasantries. "No, I'm not," I said bluntly. She sighed heavily, like she was carrying the weight of the world. "Do you know how awkward it's going to be if you're not there? People are going to ask questions. They'll notice. And that's supposed to be my problem?" I shot back. "Maybe if you all had treated me with an ounce of respect, we wouldn't be having this conversation." After that, I blocked Priya's number. I didn't want to deal with any more phone calls or guilt trips. The wedding came and went without me, and honestly, I felt fine about it. Hannah and I spent the day hiking at a nearby trail, and then treated ourselves to dinner at our favorite barbecue spot. It was peaceful, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the weight of my family's expectations pressing down on me. Part of me expected the aftermath of the wedding to bring another round of guilt trips, but it didn't. Maybe they'd finally realized I wasn't budging, or maybe they just didn't have the energy to keep pushing. Either way, the silence was a relief. Walking away wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And the more distance I put between myself and my family, the clearer everything became. Hannah has been my rock through all of this. She reminds me that it's okay to set boundaries, even with people who share your DNA. At the end of the day, I've learned that family isn't about blood. It's about the people who show up for you, who have your back no matter what. And for me, that's Hannah, my friends, and the life I've built in Austin. So no, I didn't go to Arian's wedding. I don't feel bad about it, and I don't regret my decision. My family made their choice a long time ago, and now I've made mine.